Have you ever walked away from a conversation with a bitter taste in your mouth, wondering, why did I let them speak to me like that? Some people don't speak to connect. They speak to control. They interrupt, belittle, mock, and they count on your silence to keep their power intact. But what if there's a quiet power, a way to respond without rage, just one sentence calmly spoken that changes everything? We've all had moments where words linger longer than they should, not because they were wise, but because they stung. Some people use conversation like a weapon, not to seek truth or understanding, but to dominate. They cut in, speak over. You lace their words with sarcasm, and then they expect you to sit there quietly, absorbing the blow. But Stoicism offers us a different kind of power, one that doesn't react from ego, but responds with grounded clarity. It's not about raising your voice, it's about sharpening your mind. In this video, you'll learn how to disarm rudeness without becoming rude yourself. You'll see how silence, when used intentionally, can speak louder than any outburst. If you've ever wanted to say less but mean so much more, stay close. Because what you're about to learn may forever change how you navigate conflict. 1. I'm not the one. Try someone who tolerates nonsense. Have you ever met someone who wasn't confused or joking, just plain rude? They weren't looking for clarity. They were testing you, testing if you'd tolerate being disrespected and still smile through it. I know that role. I played it well. The peacemaker. The one who laughed off the comments, bit their tongue, nodded through the shade. I told myself, stay calm, don't make waves. But here's the truth. There comes a moment, and you'll feel it deep in your bones, when silence begins to rot your dignity. When keeping the peace starts to feel like betraying yourself. For me, that moment came during a meeting at my old job. There was this guy, let's call him Colin. Colin loved the spotlight, always late, always loud, full of sarcastic quips wrapped in fake confidence. On that day, I was presenting something I had poured weeks into. Strategy, research, everything. And right in the middle of it, he smirked and said, "Do you even understand what you're saying? Sounds like a lot of fluff to me." Time slowed. That old burn flared up in my chest. Every part of me whispered, "Say it, now." So I did, calmly, without flinching. I looked at him and said, "Colin, I'm not the one. Try someone who tolerates nonsense." He blinked. The smirk vanished. Silence. No one laughed. No one rushed to defend him. Because the truth is, they'd all been waiting for someone to finally draw the line. Here's something they don't teach you in leadership seminars. Most rude people aren't powerful. They're just unchallenged. They've grown strong on silence. They've been allowed to perform unchecked because others were too polite to stop them. But when you respond, not with fury, but with composure, you strip away their stage. You dismantle the illusion that they're in control. Many people speak over others not because they're courageous, but because stillness terrifies them. They hurl insults not from strength, but from fear of looking within. That isn't power. That's just noise. And you don't need to match their volume. You don't need to get tangled in their drama. You only need one sentence, delivered with calm certainty, to remind them, "You mistook my silence for weakness." That ends here. Yes, some people will say you've changed. Let them. Others will call you difficult because you no longer allow disrespect. Let them. You were not born to cushion other people's insecurities. You were born to protect your peace. And peace, real peace, is a discipline. It's not passive. It's something you practice moment by moment. So next time someone tries to tear you down with sarcasm or pull rank in front of others, remember this: you don't have to shout to be powerful. Earlier, we learned how reclaiming your dignity starts with a single sentence: calm, clear, and firm. Now, let's take that power one step further by learning how to protect it from being chipped away by petty opinions. Sometimes all it takes is to look someone in the eye, steady, grounded, unbothered, and say, "Try someone else. I'm not the one." Because the moment you stop explaining yourself to those who clearly don't respect you, that's the moment you reclaim something priceless, your peace. And that kind of silence, that kind of certainty, it echoes, too. I'm not offended. I just don't value your opinion enough. It's strange, isn't it? How some people assume that just because they've said something out loud, it should mean something to you, as if their unsolicited opinion is sacred, something you're supposed to absorb, analyze, and immediately act on, as if their disapproval should shake your foundation. But here's the truth: simple, powerful, and unshakably calm. I'm not offended. I just don't value your opinion enough. That's not arrogance. It's clarity. I remember the moment vividly. No anger, no tension, just stillness. There was a guy I used to know. Let's call him Derek. Derek had a talent for cloaking envy in fake concern. He delivered backhanded compliments like they were part of his personal brand. One day, I posted a piece of work I'd been crafting for months. It wasn't flawless, but it was honest. It carried meaning. It came from me. And of course, Derek showed up right on cue with his signature comment, "This feels kind of cringe. Are you sure this is the vibe you want to go for?" But this time, I didn't shrink. I didn't offend. I didn't explain. I simply replied, calm and composed. "I'm not offended. I just don't value your opinion enough to care." No sharp tone, no sarcasm, just a quiet truth, and it landed like thunder. Here's what most people don't realize. Not every opinion deserves your energy. Not every voice deserves a seat at your mental table. Some people speak not from wisdom, but from insecurity that's never been dealt with. They've never built anything real, yet hand out critiques as if they're authorities, and if you let every opinion creep into your mind, soon enough, your inner world becomes a noisy forum. You lose your peace trying to please the crowd. But Stoicism reminds us your mind is your fortress. You must defend it. Marcus Aurelius wrote again and again, "The opinions of others are not truths. They're reflections. And more often than not, they reflect the speaker, not the subject. Have you noticed? The loudest critics are usually the ones furthest from the arena. They're not risking, not building, not creating. They sit on the sidelines, pointing fingers, because it's always easier to spectate than to show up. But when you answer them with stillness, not pride, not fury, just unwavering calm, something shifts. You take away their grip. You show them that your self-worth doesn't hang on their reaction. You don't have to be shaken by people who don't even understand the path you're walking. Their voice is not your compass. And setting that boundary isn't rude, it's self-respect. The moment you stop seeking validation from people who don't even see your vision, that's the moment you begin to walk lighter, freer. So next time someone cloaks jealousy in a joke or masks disrespect as just being honest, pause, breathe, smile, and say with ease, "I'm not offended, I just don't value your opinion enough." Because the most unsettling thing to the insecure is someone who no longer needs their permission to exist. Previously, we explored how reclaiming your peace means refusing to grant power to voices that don't deserve your attention. But what happens when someone doesn't want peace? They want a stage? 3. That's a strange way to beg for attention. Some people don't insult you because they're bold or honest. They do it because they're hungry for attention, hungry to feel relevant, desperate to fill the emptiness inside themselves with noise, any noise. It's not about you. It's not about truth. It's about being noticed. They walk into a room and, like clockwork, search for the easiest targets. Your outfit, your ideas, your past, even your silence, especially your confidence. They throw little jabs, sarcastic comments masked as humor, hoping people will laugh, hoping someone will mistake their cruelty for cleverness. But if you really look beneath the smirk, beneath the bravado, what you'll see is something far more fragile: hunger. And sometimes the most piercing response isn't a counterattack, it's a calm sentence. A mirror. That's a strange way to beg for attention. I remember a night like that clearly. It was just a casual gathering, easy vibes, good company, until Ethan arrived. You know the type. The guy who always needs to be the loudest voice in the room, the center of gravity. He started doing what he always did, poking fun at others, throwing out shallow jokes like confetti, all to steal a laugh. Eventually, he turned to me and said, "Loud enough for everyone to hear, still working on that little project of yours? Must be nice to have so much free time." The old me might have chuckled nervously or tried to justify myself, but that day I didn't. I looked at him, smiled gently, and said, "That's a strange way to beg for attention. Do you need a hug or something?" The room didn't turn tense. It turned clear, because in that moment, everyone saw it. This wasn't wit. It wasn't charm. It was insecurity wearing a mask. And once you name it, it loses its power. Here's the Stoic truth. People who constantly tear others down are usually drowning in fears they've never faced. They insult not to speak truth, but to distract from their own inner stagnation. They get loud not because they're confident, but because silence would force them to face who they really are. When you calmly name what's really going on, not to humiliate but to reveal, something inside them shrinks. Because attention seekers don't fear being insulted, they fear being seen. We live in a world where sarcasm is often mistaken for depth, where shock replaces sincerity. People say reckless things not because they truly believe them, but because they're addicted to the rush of your reaction. But what if you didn't give them what they wanted? What if, instead of reacting with anger, you responded with clarity? That's why this one line is so powerful. That's a strange way to beg for attention. It doesn't fight, it reflects, it doesn't attack. It exposes. And exposure is what the ego fears most. Not every insult deserves your energy. But some moments do deserve the truth, delivered without fire, without malice, just precision and poise. So, the next time someone tries to chip away at you with a cheap joke or a backhanded comment, don't argue. Don't rise to the bait. Don't join the performance. Just smile and offer them a mirror. In the next part, we'll explore the hidden strength of detachment, how to stop being emotionally available for those who don't respect your presence, and why walking away can sometimes be the most powerful move of all. In the last part, we saw how exposing someone's need for attention calmly and clearly can silence even the loudest room. But what about those who don't seek attention with insults, but with endless noise? 4. Every time you speak, it's a reminder to value silence. You've likely met them. The kind of people who speak just to fill the air, not to connect, not to listen, not even to share anything meaningful, but to control, to avoid the discomfort of silence, because silence demands presence. And some people are terrified of what they'll find in that quiet. They talk fast, talk long, talk loud. They flood every pause as if stillness itself were a threat. Their confidence is theatrical. Their volume is high, but their substance often paper thin. And once you start noticing it, you can't unsee it. You begin to realize every time they speak, they unknowingly remind you of the power and dignity of silence. I remember this one group chat I was in. There was this guy, let's call him Jordan. He was always the first to comment, the last to stop, and never without an opinion. It didn't matter what we were talking about. Relationships, money, stoicism, politics, books. Jordan had something to say. But the problem wasn't that he had opinions. It was that they rarely held weight. His words felt borrowed, twisted, or drenched in criticism. It wasn't conversation, it was performance. Ego dressed up as expertise. One day, in the middle of a discussion, he confidently tried to correct someone on a topic he clearly didn't understand. There was a pause. I could have argued. I could have rolled my eyes, but I didn't. Instead, I said calmly, clearly, you know, every time you speak, it's a reminder to value silence. No sarcasm, no aggression. Just stillness, wrapped in truth. And the chat went silent, not out of tension, out of recognition, because the truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be spoken once, and it rearranges the whole room. The uncomfortable reality is this: some people dominate conversations not because they're wise, but because they're afraid of being unseen. They talk and talk, louder and longer than necessary, because silence would force them to face themselves, without applause, without an audience, without distraction. That's why they interrupt. That's why they overstate, not out of depth, but out of fear. But here's what Stoicism teaches us. Power doesn't lie in the quantity of your words, it lies in your control over them, in knowing when to speak and when not to. There's strength in restraint, there's dignity in brevity, and there's real mastery in not needing to prove yourself with noise. You've heard the saying, empty barrels make the most noise, and it holds true. The loudest voices are often the most hollow. They confuse dominance with depth. They mistake sarcasm for wit. They believe speaking over others makes them superior, but it only reveals their insecurity. So the next time someone tries to hijack the moment with inflated confidence and recycled ideas, don't compete. Don't meet chaos with chaos. Don't raise your voice to match theirs. Just look them in the eye, steady and composed, and say, every time you speak, it's a reminder to value silence. Because that one sentence, it doesn't just quiet the room, it reclaims the space. It elevates the moment. And more importantly, it reminds everyone watching that silence is not absence. It is power. Next, we'll explore a line that isn't just about reclaiming your voice. It's about reclaiming your standards, When someone tries to shame you for not tolerating dysfunction, there's a quiet response that resets everything. Let's dive into it. Previously, we uncovered how silence can be a weapon, not of retreat, but of command. Now, we step into another form of quiet strength, the kind that refuses to hand over your emotions to those trying to provoke you. Psalm 5. If you're trying to hurt my feelings, you'll have to try harder. Most insults aren't about truth. They're about control. The person throwing them isn't interested in honesty. They're fishing for a reaction, a flinch, a crack. Proof that they've gotten under your skin, that they have emotional access to you. But here's the thing, when you don't flinch, when you don't explain, justify, or even blink, they lose completely. There's a quiet kind of power in simply smiling, unbothered, and saying, if you're trying to hurt my feelings, you'll have to try harder. It's not arrogance. It's emotional sovereignty. It's the calm confidence of someone who's no longer at the mercy of other people's immaturity. It's a message. I've outgrown the version of me that used to bleed for every careless word. I remember when words used to pierce straight through. I was younger then, more fragile. There was this guy, Lucas, who once looked me up and down, laughed and said, "You actually think that looks good?" I laughed it off like it didn't matter. Went home, changed clothes. Then there was the time someone scoffed when I shared my dream and said, "That's adorable. You really think you'll make it?" I didn't sleep right for days. I replayed their words in my head for weeks, questioning everything. But life, real life, doesn't shape you through compliments. It shapes you through rejection, through loss, through nights where you sit in silence, alone in the wreckage of something you thought would hold. And slowly, that pain becomes clarity. I stopped listening, not because the world got gentler, but because I got stronger. The truth is, people can only cut you deeply when a part of you fears they might be right. But when you know who you are, when you've been through more than they'll ever know, when you've been underestimated, laughed at, abandoned, and still kept walking, their little jabs don't land. They bounce off armor, forged in fire. So now, when someone throws shade or takes a passive-aggressive shot, I don't shrink. I don't lash out. I meet their gaze and I say, without anger, without theatrics, if you're trying to hurt my feelings, you'll have to try harder. Because if you think a weak jab is going to shake me, you clearly have no idea what I've survived. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people feel tall only when they can make you small. They want you insecure because insecure people are easier to manipulate. They want you reactive because then they control the story. But when you stay grounded, start composed, untouchable, you shatter the game they're trying to play. That one sentence, it's not just a comeback, it's a shield. It says, you don't get to define me. Your words hold no power here. I've walked through storms you couldn't stand in, and this doesn't move me. That's not denial, that's discernment. It's not pretending they didn't try, it's refusing to absorb it. Stoicism teaches us this exact form of freedom, the freedom that comes not from controlling others, but from mastering yourself. Not reacting isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And when you faced heartbreak, humiliation, failure, and still chosen to rise, what is one cheap insult to a soul that's been through fire and kept burning? So the next time someone tries to bruise your spirit with a fake laugh, a sly remark, or an obvious dig, don't return their energy. Don't stoop to meet their pettiness. In the next part, we'll talk about what to say when someone crosses your boundary and pretends they were just joking. How do you respond without losing control, yet still reclaim your power? Let's go there. In the last section, we explored how composure isn't weakness, it's wisdom. When you no longer let insults pierce you, you rise above the chaos others try to pull you into. But what happens when someone doesn't just want to hurt your feelings? They want to provoke you? 6. You're not on the level to get a reaction from me. Sometimes the most devastating response isn't loud, clever, or cruel. It's calm, direct, and dismissive. Why does this line cut so deep? Because it doesn't insult. It erases. It doesn't shout. It doesn't try to win. It simply removes the other person from the equation with no drama, no raised tone, no theatrics. It says, you don't even qualify for my attention, let alone my reaction. In any confrontation, there are two types of people, those who seek understanding and those who seek control. The second type isn't interested in truth. They don't want resolution. They want disruption. They're not talking to connect. They're performing, and the stage they're using? Your emotions. But this line, you're not on the level to get a reaction from me, is like pulling the curtain down. It ends the show without applause. It tells them, this isn't your stage. This isn't your audience. And I'm not playing. I'll never forget what happened at one of my old jobs. There was a guy, Trent, the kind of person who thrives on subtle digs and underhanded remarks. He didn't contribute much, but he loved tension. He fed off it. One day, I was presenting a new strategy I'd spent weeks developing. Clean, focused, well-reasoned. Halfway through my explanation, Trent leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said just loud enough for the room to hear, "Not bad?" For someone who's usually 5 minutes late. I had choices. I could have snapped back. I could have embarrassed him. I could have defended myself. But I didn't. Instead, I looked right at him, calm, steady, and said, "You're not on the level to get a reaction from me." Then I turned back to the presentation like nothing had been said. No pause, no sigh, just complete focus. And suddenly, the room shifted, not because I raised my voice, but because I didn't. Not because I fought, but because I refused to be pulled into his chaos. People like Trent survive on acknowledgement, even if it's negative. When you deny them that without cruelty, just clarity, you reveal something brutal. They don't matter as much as they think they do. And for someone whose entire sense of identity is tied to getting under people's skin, that realization stings. Here's the deeper truth. You don't win by trading jabs. You win by being untouchable. You win by showing that not everyone gets a seat at your emotional table, that your peace is not up for grabs, that their drama doesn't deserve your energy. This line works because it delivers the one thing their ego fears most. You're not hurt. You're not even paying attention. You don't see them as a rival. You see them as background noise. And in that moment, they realize all the power they thought they had. It never really existed. How do you deliver it? With calm, with clarity. Look them in the eye. Say it once and only once. Then shift your attention. Change the subject. Walk away. Don't explain. Don't repeat. Let your silence linger longer than their attitude. Because in a world full of people desperate to feel seen, desperate to feel powerful by provoking others, your indifference is the loudest disruption you can offer. In the next part, we'll take this even deeper into what to say when someone tries to disguise disrespect as a joke. How do you shut it down without ever raising your voice? You'll want to hear this next one. In the last part, we talked about how indifference is the ultimate response, how calm composure can disarm those who thrive on emotional chaos. But sometimes people disguise their jabs as jokes, and when that happens, there's a response that quietly exposes everything they're trying to hide. 7. That was a lot of effort just to sound insecure. This line doesn't shout, it doesn't curse, it doesn't even raise an eyebrow, and yet it hits harder than any insult. Because it doesn't just respond, it reveals. It peels back the mask that most rude people wear, the mask of confidence, of superiority, and shows what's really underneath: insecurity. People like that don't want truth. They want to feel taller by shrinking others. They toss out slick remarks, backhanded compliments, passive digs, not to be funny, but to boost themselves. They use arrogance as armor, sarcasm as camouflage. But when you calmly say, "That was a lot of effort just to sound insecure," without a hint of emotion, you don't fight back. You hold up a mirror, and to someone who's been hiding behind a persona, that mirror is unbearable. I remember a specific moment during a project presentation I had poured weeks into. The room had just gone quiet. All eyes were on me. And then Darren, a colleague who always felt the need to stir the pot, leaned back with a smug grin and said, "Well, I guess confidence really can make anything sound smart." It was the kind of comment designed to look casual, a joke, maybe, but it was anything but harmless. It was calculated, subtle, aimed right at my credibility. But I didn't bite. I didn't justify. I didn't even blink. I just smiled and replied, "That was a lot of effort just to sound insecure." Silence, not just from him, from the whole room, because everyone felt it. He didn't get a laugh, he didn't get approval, he got exposed, and that's why this line works so powerfully. It flips the entire dynamic. Suddenly, you're not the one being scrutinized. They are. You're not reacting emotionally. You're responding with clarity. You're not insulted. You're observant. And with just one sentence, you dismantle the illusion they've been hiding behind. Here's the deeper truth most people miss. Insults aren't usually about you. They're about someone else's desperate need to feel relevant, to feel seen, to feel like they matter, even if it's just for a moment. But when you stay calm, composed, unshaken, they lose the one thing they were counting on: your reaction, your emotional engagement. And by calmly calling out the insecurity beneath their words, you don't just take back your power. You force them to face themselves, even if just for a fleeting second. Pro tip: after saying the line, pause. Let the silence speak. Don't explain it. Don't soften it. Don't follow it up with a smile or a chuckle. Let it hang in the air, because when you say it without flinching, and then say nothing else, the silence becomes thunder. The mirror becomes unmistakable. Up next, we'll close with the final line, the one that doesn't just silence disrespect but transforms your presence entirely. A sentence that redefines your power without ever having to prove it. Let's finish strong. In the last section, we learned how a single calm sentence, spoken without flinching, can silence even the most disguised form of disrespect. Now, let's complete the picture with the final reminder of what real power looks like. Let them sit with the truth you've just placed in front of them. not because your words were cruel or loud, but because they were clear. Because what truly stings isn't the comeback itself. It's the silence that follows. It's the realization that everyone else saw it too. So next time someone tosses shade, wrapped in fake wit or phony politeness, don't take the bait. Don't match their energy. Don't even blink. Just remember, that was a lot of effort just to sound insecure. Say it without tension. Say it with composure. Then let your silence finish the conversation for you, because when you master your response, you master the moment. And when you master the moment, you become untouchable. These lines we've covered aren't just clever comebacks. They're calm boundaries, quiet declarations. They're reminders, stoic reminders, that not everyone deserves access to your energy. They say, just because you're loud doesn't mean you get a piece of my peace. Real strength isn't about overpowering someone. It's about staying centered while someone else spins in their chaos. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, insult you, or rattle your confidence, don't step into their storm. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to match their mood. You don't even need to explain yourself. All it takes is one calm sentence, delivered not like a sword, but like a scalpel. Precise, clean, and unforgettable. Let them sit with their own discomfort. Let your silence echo long after their attitude fades. Say what needs to be said and then walk away, not because you're avoiding the fight, but because you've already won it by refusing to play. You have better things to build, a mind to sharpen, a peace to protect, because that's what true strength is. Not the noise you create, but the chaos you refuse to let in. Until next time, stand tall, speak with purpose, protect your peace.